In the CNN newsroom, I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. Thank you for being here. Our breaking news this hour: an unspeakable act of violence at a church in Texas. 26 people are dead, 20 injured after a gunman's rampage. It happened at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, about 30 miles east of San Antonio. Two law enforcement sources have now identified the shooter as 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly. Officials say the gunman, dressed all in black, was wearing a ballistic vest, was armed with an assault-type rifle when he opened fire on the First Baptist Church. Victims range in age from 5 to 72 years old. Texas Governor Greg Abbott became emotional as he described the magnitude of this tragedy.
As a state, we are dealing with the largest mass shooting in our state's history. There's so many families who've lost family members, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. The tragedy, of course, is worsened by the fact that it occurred in a church, a place of worship, where these people were innocently gunned down.
We are told the shooter died after a brief chase into a neighboring county. There's still no word on a motive, but we are getting new information about how the attack unfolded. Listen to this.
At approximately 11:20 this morning, a suspect was seen at a Valero gas station in Sutherland Springs, Texas. He was dressed in all black. That suspect crossed the street to the church, exited his vehicle, and began firing at the church. That suspect then moved to the right side of the church and continued to fire. That suspect entered the church and continued to fire. As he exited the church, a local resident grabbed his rifle and engaged that suspect. The suspect dropped his rifle, which was a Ruger AR assault-type rifle, and fled from the church. Our local citizen pursued the suspect at that time. A short time later, as law enforcement responded, that suspect, right at the Wilson, Guadalupe County line, he ran off the roadway and crashed out and was found deceased in his vehicle. At this time, we don't know if it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound or if he was shot by our local resident who engaged him in gunfire. We know he's deceased in the vehicle. The suspect has not been completely identified. We believe he's a young white male, maybe in his early 20s. He was dressed in all black tactical type gear and was wearing a ballistic vest.
President Trump, speaking abroad from Japan, called the shooting an act of evil, adding, quote, "We cannot put into words the pain and grief we all feel." CNN's Kaylee Hartung has been following the story from the very beginning. And Kaylee, what more can you tell us about the victims?
26 dead, Anna, as a result of this morning's shooting, ranging in age from just 5 years old to 72 years old. Authorities not ready to publicly share the names of those victims with us yet, as they say their first priority is to the victims' families, to ensuring that they are receiving the information they need in its most accurate form. Many people gathering for a vigil tonight and at a community center just down the street from the church to get that information, to have access to local authorities and officials, and to learn the fate of those who were attending the First Baptist 11 a.m. church service this morning. Officials also say there are approximately 20 others being treated in area hospitals with conditions ranging from minor to critical. So you hope this number, 26 dead, doesn't grow. Already the largest mass shooting in the history of the state of Texas, but another 20 or so individuals fighting tonight.
Kaylee Hartung, thank you. I want to bring in our panel of law enforcement experts to discuss the investigation moving forward. Cheryl Dorsey is a retired LAPD police sergeant. James Galliano is a former FBI supervisory agent, and Art Roderick, a former assistant director for the U.S. Marshal's Office. Art, you and I haven't had a chance to talk, so I'll start with you. Police say this suspected gunman was dressed in all black tactical gear. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. He was armed with an assault-type rifle. That gives the impression that this was carefully planned, but the sheriff just moments ago told me that this gunman had no connection to this church, was not from that community. What do you make of that?
Well, I've checked with some law enforcement sources too, and he might not be from that particular county, but I think he is from the surrounding area. The interesting thing, there's a couple things that came out of that presser that, or the bit that just played a little while ago, that it's an Ruger AR-15, which to me is the nomenclature for a semi-automatic .223 caliber assault rifle. And if he's firing through the walls of that that church, that very small building, those bullets are going to go right through there and just hit people inside the church very easily. Usually the bullets coming out of an AR-15 travel at about 3,300 feet per second and are made to hit bone and create as much tissue damage as it can in the body. So that is a horrible weapon to be shot with, and I have to tell you that I hope the casualty count doesn't go up, but it very well could.
Right now, 26 dead, about 20 others who are injured. Witnesses say they know people personally who are among those injured in critical condition. James Galliano, does it surprise you that this gunman apparently was not from that community specifically? Again,
and you and I have spoken about this earlier this evening, trying to determine motive. And motive tells us a lot of things. And one of the things is, was this a target of opportunity? Was this somebody that just became unraveled that morning for something as innocuous as his coffee wasn't hot enough? Or was this something premeditated? And then again, to Art's point, we want to build this out further to determine whether or not there were co-conspirators. The law enforcement at the press conference have indicated that there doesn't seem to be any more imminent threat. That doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't other folks that might have been participatory, some of them doing it purposely, possible, or even unwitting. So all of that's got to be built out. And the last thing I want to say about the weapons again, they were very careful in describing this as a Ruger assault rifle. And assault rifles have different definitions by jurisdiction inside the country. But we know that it generally includes a semi-automatic weapon, as Art pointed out.
A .223 is what we're told from officials who are familiar.
.223, which is also a 5.556 caliber NATO round. Those are interchangeable terms for the same type of round.
Put that in layman's terms for us.
That's just the caliber. That's how, at the NATO level, because you're using it in the military, it's the military round for the old style M16. That's now become the M4. But for someone that purchased a Ruger, and I'm going to speculate here and say that this might have been a Bushmaster, the Ruger Mini 14, that type of weapon could be considered an assault rifle. Because why? Can have a pistol grip to it, can have a detachable magazine, a barrel shroud, flash suppressor, and even if it's semi-automatic, as we discussed earlier, Anna, could have had a 20 or 30 round magazine attached to it and might have had multiple. With that many people shot, as Art again said, you know, that round goes, it's so, 2,800 feet per second, 3,300 feet per second, but depending upon the exact gun, that goes through not just one person, but 2 or 3 other people, could have caused multiple casualties.
When I asked the sheriff if he knew if it was a semi-automatic or more, he couldn't answer that question, but based on the type of weapon that it is, would it automatically be at least a semi-automatic or not necessarily?
It would have to be. You could not have done this type of carnage in that amount of time, as they described, with a bolt-action rifle. This was something that it had to be a semi-automatic weapon with a detachable magazine. Again, we don't know the size of the detachable magazine, but you could not have done this type of damage in that short amount of time with a bolt-action hunting rifle.
I want to get Cheryl Dorsey into the conversation as well. This church, we know, recorded its sermons, and the sheriff tells us this attack was, in fact, recorded on videotape. In fact, the person making the recording, he says, is at the hospital, not necessarily because he was shot, but he is among those who were taken to the hospital. What will investigators be looking for on this recording?
Well, they're going to look for anything that will help them identify, obviously, how the shooter was able to gain access into the church sanctuary and what action was taken once he got in there. And so understand that most oftentimes cameras are positioned to the rear of the church and facing in towards the pulpit area. So you really don't see a whole lot of activity at the front door. You see all the activity that's occurring down in the pulpit. And so I'm not sure that the kinds of things that we want to see, other than people dying in real time, is going to be really made available.
Art, I was based in Colorado and covered the Aurora Theater shooting when that happened. I can't help but think about the similarities. Both men dressed in tactical gear, both opening fire in this enclosed space on unsuspecting people sitting in rows, or in this case, pews. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the key here, and I know we've talked about this all afternoon, but it's going to be the motive. What caused him to flip today, and what caused him to go onto this rampage? But this was planned. I mean, you don't dress up in black tactical gear and wear a bulletproof vest and carry multiple firearms without having some plan, predetermined. So I just don't think he snapped like today. I think this has been something that he's been looking at doing for a while, and that he went ahead and possibly, very possibly, staked this church out earlier and made the determination this would be the best soft target he could pick out. Fortunately, the neighbor was armed and actually very possibly could have stopped him from continuing to fire into the church, although apparently from the sheriff's discussion, it looks like he might have been leaving the interior of the church at that point in time. But either way, it sounds like he stopped him from what he was doing. He dropped his weapon, got in the car, and then that short chase ensued.
And we have learned that there were additional firearms inside that vehicle. Everyone, thank you. Stand by. I want to bring in CNN's Gustavo Valdez. He is live in Sutherland Springs, Texas now, where a vigil is underway. We know the governor is there also. Gustavo, tell me what you're seeing.
Anna, good evening. As you can see, a small but growing number of residents, not only from this small community, but the other ones around the area, are gathering here in disbelief. They can't believe something like this happened in a city so small, in a city where they tell me everybody is Christian, everybody knows each other, everybody helps each other. We understand the governor is also participating in this candlelight. One of the speakers a few moments ago asked for everybody to not let this be a moment of hate, not to let this moment lead to an escalation of hate. He asked for everybody to pray for the victims that we know are still being treated at their local hospitals, and this while the police are investigating the crime scene directly across from where the candlelight vigil is taking place. A few minutes ago, I talked to a couple from Floresville, which is about 14 miles away from this location. They told me even though they were not members of this church, they knew the pastor. He ran a pantry for the needy people. They said he was always there to assist people whenever they needed. They tell me the pastor wasn't at the church at the moment, but they knew the 14-year-old daughter who perished in this attack. They told me they knew her since she was a little baby, and they can't believe that this is happening. Also, a couple of hours ago, I talked to another gentleman who told me that he comes to this church every Sunday. Today, he overslept. However, his cousin and his family were there. His cousin is wounded, being treated at the hospital. His pregnant wife, she was carrying an 8-month-old baby. She is dead. Her parents are dead. And 3 of the 5 children they had are also dead. One of them is struggling to save her life in a local hospital. This is something that has touched everybody. I started driving from Houston to get here, and everywhere I stopped, I heard people talking about it. They can't believe that this small community is going through this. And it's a community like many others in this part of Texas. Yes, we are about 30 minutes away from San Antonio, population 1 million. Over 1 million people live there. But if you drive through South Texas, you're going to find these little rural communities. I saw signs of the recently harvested corn in the area, the cattle grazing the fields. These are agricultural communities. They're very close. Everybody knows each other. Everybody helps each other because they know that the big help, as we're noticing with the police, it's miles and miles away. They have to help each other, and right now they're rallying together, trying to pray for the survivors. Anna?
It's heartwarming to see those people coming together behind you, Gustavo. Tell me a little bit more about what they're doing, and I can only see just a small glimpse of the image there, but how many people are there?
I can't give you an exact count. They've been going on for about, 30 minutes by now. They're listening to Christian music. Every once in a while, somebody asks to say something, they say a few words, and everybody, prays with them, say amen. They have their hands raised. They've been very, very respectful. Somebody else is talking in this moment. I can't see who it is. But something I can tell you, a lot of the participants are young people. They're people who know this is something that is going to affect them for many more years. This is something that is going to mark their little town for many years, and they want to be part of the healing process right now. We see a lot of children, and also it is a very diverse community. Hispanics, whites, people of color are gathering together in this candlelight vigil to pray for the victims.
Gustavo Valdez, thank you for that reporting. Much more ahead here in the newsroom. This is special CNN breaking news, live coverage of a mass shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas, claiming 26 lives and wounding nearly 24 more. Stay with us.